If you really want to have a very, very special relationship, it's having the guts to let the other person in, like really in, to the deepest, darkest depths of your soul. Because on the other side of that is a level of acceptance and trust that is very, very special.
Welcome to the I Heart My Life show, James. Today we are going to be talking all about our biggest lessons in marriage as we come up to our 10-year wedding anniversary, which is crazy to say. So
Yeah,
welcome.
it's always fun to be here with you, my love. 10 years. I think I said to someone the other day, I said, if our next 10 years is as adventurous as the last 10 years, I'll probably need a nap for a week.
Yes. It's been crazy. So let's take people back and share a little bit about how we met first and foremost, because it is a really crazy story. Do you want to share?
I'll start it off. Yeah. I mean, it's, guy from small village southwest of London meets girl from Columbus, Ohio. And so that, was not what I ever expected. So I was living in southwest London as a guy in his early 30s. And I decided to jump back onto the online dating world. And I logged in, and this was a site that, I knew the person that started the site. And it wasn't the classiest of sites ever, was it, Emily? And we...
No. And you had a free subscription, right?
So I saw your face and thought, going to see if this lady wants to chat. And I chatted and we texted, and it all started there.
Yeah. And the crazy thing is I had moved to London about a year before, just completely on a whim, and I didn't know anyone there. I just felt like I was meant to live there. And obviously, as fate would have it, we met online. And for that year, I'd been pouring myself into the world of online dating because I found that it was easier to meet guys than to try and make friends with women. And so I had this free 2-week trial on the website that you're talking about. And we don't even know if it exists, so we don't need to share the name. But basically, it was designed to help people meet at some of the more exclusive clubs in London and get access to those clubs. And I remember going to one of their events on my own, and I was not into the club scene anyway, but it was so loud. I couldn't understand how you would ever even connect with anyone on a deep level, which probably is not why people were actually there. And so I kind of had written it off and didn't even know that that website was showing me as online when you messaged me. And, we quickly had our very first date the next day. It was in the morning because you were working shifts and you were working later on, and I was a student and a nanny. And then we met up the next day. Then my parents came to visit, and I remember telling them about you, and you comforted me on our third date after they had left and gone back to Ohio. And really, we were pretty much inseparable from there on out, and ended up getting engaged within 6 months. So...
yeah, and that was a big deal for me because up until that point, I think a lot of my friends and my family thought I was being too picky, not really maintaining any relationships. And yeah, we gelled straight away. And I can tell you what it was for me. The reason people ask me this all the time, what was it? I mean, obviously Emily's beautiful and she's a really amazing person, but what it was for me that, and I don't think I was conscious of it at the time, but looking back, was that Emily and I have something in common, and that is we both kind of go against the grain of what those that knew us would have assumed we do, or maybe what they thought we should do. And we had this commonality of wanting to do things slightly against the grain, right? Rather than just follow the way it's always been done. And I think that's really where we clicked, because we kind of held a safe space for our, what might have seemed crazy ideas or big thinking or just, thinking differently. And I think that's why we felt very safe with each other very, very quickly.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that, looking back, there's a lot of things that we could have never predicted. But because we both have that mindset and we love to think expansively and we love to do new things, it has led us to this journey of working in the same industry and oftentimes working in the same company, which was never ever part of the plan. Because when we met, you were in a career, you were there for 12 years. And I was, as you described, like this person with this fire, this fireball inside of her, and this frustration because I had no clue what I was doing, and was still on search, searching for that clarity and for my purpose. So anyway, a lot of what we're talking about today is, our lessons, and also lessons from the lens of like we're living a life that in many ways we never expected to be living, at least not in this way. And so there's been a lot of learnings and a lot of things that we've had to overcome and work through that have been unexpected.
Yeah, for sure.
So, what is the first thing that you want to share with people today about what you've learned being married to me for 10 years?
Okay, so the first one is kind of a fun one. And I think a lot of relationships will resonate with this one. But when you first meet someone, obviously it's quite surface level things you're looking for. Someone who's you're attracted to, that has similar ideals, right, that you enjoy spending time with. But I can honestly say I was reflecting on, what are the things I love the most about Emily and why? And I can honestly say it's those times where Emily is completely and utterly vulnerable and open with me, which often looks like the goofy side, right? Or the silly side, which is just the reason why I love her for that is because it is, she has a career and a goal that's massive and, outward facing, and there's a brand and there's all this stuff. And I get to see this side of her that most other people don't. And it's because she trusts me. So I love those little things, those little goofy moments we have that it's just our little world we're in and nothing else exists except us. And I think that probably a lot of married couples resonate with that, right? It's just those little goofy moments that are only shared between you. And 10 years on, we still have those little goofy kind of like fun, silly moments where nothing else exists in the world but you each other in that moment. So I'd say that's the first one for me. The lesson in that is make, like, any seriously incredible relationship has trust, right? Trust to be the most authentic version of you, whether that's the breaking down, the crying, the goofy, the silly, the just truth, the expression. I think that one thing that me and Emily have learned in our relationship is that, being with someone that you feel totally comfortable to be yourself with, which is not just about them. It's not just about you allowing me to be myself or me allowing you to be yourself, but it's us being brave enough to let someone in. And so I guess the lesson in that is that if you really want to have a very, very special relationship, it's having the guts to let the other person in, like really in, to the deepest, darkest depths of your soul. Because on the other side of that is a level of acceptance and trust that is very, very special. And it's probably like that with all relationships, but especially that one, right?
So, my first thing that I want to share is to always be honest about what you need. And we really learned this through working with relationship coaches and just navigating being really different in the way that we work and in ways we move through the world, and understanding, like, even me as an introvert and you as more of an extrovert, that we require different things from social situations. And so I remember even in the beginning of our relationship, and you can definitely speak to this from your perspective, but there were times where I would leave parties early or not go to things. And I know that kind of bothered you at first and you didn't really understand. And there were times where I, felt guilty doing that, but we learned to really accept each other and be honest about what we need. And even through the relationship coaching that we did, it was more about, being like, how do I say this? The relationship coaching ended up being more about individualized coaching than anything else. Because if you're taking care of yourself and you are putting yourself first, so to speak, not in a selfish way, but in a self-care and a self-love way, then that
Mm.
impacts the relationship. And not being honest leads to resentment and leads to neither of you actually getting what you want, because it's not an honest relationship. And one person starts to resent the other, and one is being inauthentic, and you can feel that energetically. So all around, that exquisite honesty, as Marla calls it, Marla Mattinson, is really one of the most powerful things in a
It
relationship.
is, and acceptance, right? And I think you're totally right. It's interesting where we have assumptions about what each other should or shouldn't do, or should or shouldn't be, or and that's what that was, right? I might have had an assumption about how late you should stay out, or you might have had an assumption about how all sorts of things. And when those shoulds come up, it's really interesting because it filters onto what my next point was, which we'll go into in a minute. But that real level of acceptance, um, again, it's really nice to know that you can just do what you want to do, and your partner will accept you for it, even if no one else in the room does, because it makes you feel understood, right? And that's especially for a relationship like ours, where we spend a lot of time together, has been so important to grow through.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because it brings up this idea of, people say that relationships are all about compromise. And I get what they're trying to say there, but I do think it's possible for both of us to live our authentic lives and to be honest and to put ourselves first and still have have an amazing relationship and love. And, one of the exercises that I really love that we've learned over the years is really asking each other, on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is
Mm-hmm.
this to you? And then if I know it's a 10 for you, or 9 or 8 or whatever, it's not about me compromising. It's about me understanding and wanting to show up and do whatever that thing is, because
Yeah.
it's important to you. And I think, like, innately, when I hear the word compromise, I also hear kind of like
Mm-hmm.
self-sacrifice and doing something you don't want to do. But I feel like we've gotten to the point where it's either, we don't want to do it and it's not a big deal to the other person and there's acceptance there, or we have a conversation around, this is actually really important to me, and then the other person feels like almost inspired or desires
Yeah,
to
because
do
then
something.
you're just doing out of love. So the fact that you don't want to do the thing doesn't matter, because you feel like you're loving me, or I'm loving you by going along or doing the thing. So yeah, again, it comes back down to communication, and we weren't always there, but it's something we've
Yeah.
really developed. It's been really important for us.
And
So
what's
my
your
next one,
next
it
one?
kind of blends in with that quite well. Um, I wrote the things that trigger or upset me in our relationship say more about me than they do about you. And I think that's a really good one for relationships, right? So if there's something that you've done that's triggered me, now I'm at a place where I'll stop and think, well, what does that mean about me? Why is there emotion coming up there? Again, it might be what we said, like the whole should. Oh, I thought she was going to react like this, or this should have happened like this. And so, and again, there's certainly not perfection here, but it's definitely a lesson that we've learned, right? Because we're both quite strong characters. And so, understanding and noticing our own triggers, and sort of diving into them a little bit before we go into blame or accusations or anything to attack the other one with, has been huge, for us. As like I said, as strong personalities, both people want to do things, we have our own opinions. And so that's been a really great one to recognize, because also there's personal growth in that, you know.
That's so good. It makes me think of how when we're pointing at somebody, there's actually one finger that's
Yeah.
pointed towards
Yeah.
ourselves.
Mm.
And it's so true. Love that. Mine kind of feeds onto that one as well, off of that one as well. So I put, when you don't want to talk, do so anyway. And what I mean by that is, I can probably count on 2 hands the amount of times that you and I have gone to bed angry. And every time we get a terrible night's sleep, it like we just stay up and are tossing and turning, and it's just like emotionally taxing. And if we would have just talked it out, then it would have been a
Mm.
million times better. And so, yes, there are times where you have to go away and kind of collect yourself, and you might need some space for a while. But the quicker, at least in our relationship, that we can communicate and talk things out, even if it's challenging, the better, because things festering, like, that's way more emotionally draining than actually having the
Yeah.
conversation itself.
Yeah, that's huge. Yeah, that's really huge. It's the easiest thing in the world just to give in and just, allow the mood to take over. And like Emily says, it's not something that's happened very often, um, because it's just way too important. And it's so easy. It's so easy actually to overcome that moment. It mustn't feel it, but all it is just a little handout. It's like, you know, a hug or a.
Well, yeah, it comes down to releasing the ego and
Mhm,
letting go of pride,
mhm.
because that's all it is. It's like, I know, or at least for me, when the moments when I haven't wanted to have the conversation, I'm like, well, I'm just gonna let him, sit in that, and
Full
that's
ego.
just all about pride and not actually putting the
Yeah,
relationship
yeah.
first.
So, well, that blends into my next one, which has always been big for me. Is self care is such a big subject for me in my coaching and in my life as I call a recovering giver. I grew up really knowing that if I was to give to others, I would get love back, and I went too far with that to the point where I wasn't giving enough to myself. So in our relationship at the very beginning, it'd be easy for me to get resentful because I would go so above and beyond for Emily. I wouldn't do enough for myself. And then there was resentment because it's like, well, she's not doing enough for me or whatever. Right. And so, and you kind of touched on this earlier, that I realized that the more I focus on doing what I need to do to be fulfilled, the better prepared I am to be the husband that you need.
Yeah. And I actually think it's really attractive now that I've seen you put this into practice and say things like, even with recording this podcast episode, well, let's do it at a different time because I have something else going on, or no, I actually can't do that right now, versus being
Mm,
self sacrificing.
yeah. That's huge. And it's huge in the world,
I
right?
love
That's,
that.
how many marriages have resentment in them? And that, it's resentment in itself is literally just your body and your mind telling yourself, why are you paying more attention to that than you are to me? And that was definitely guilty of that. And it still crops up. That's why I hold that recover and give a virtual coin, right? Because it's so easy for me to, out of love, want to go above and beyond for you. But I'd rather do it as the stronger person, so you get this really strong guy looking after you, than, like you said, the person that's not fueling himself. And especially with baby coming and everything like that, that's got to step up to an even greater level, because there's going to be two women that I get to go above and beyond for, right? So it means really doubling down on self care. So whether it's a marriage or any relationship, it's just, for me, that's probably the biggest one, really.
Yeah. Yeah. And you've grown leaps and bounds with that. So my next one is remember you're a
Mm,
team. And I put that because I think I have a tendency, well, I know I have a tendency to try and do everything on my own and to not involve you in the conversation in, a way that would be really helpful and would be yeah, just beneficial for me. I try and like figure out the solution or do the thing. And I mean, you've reminded me through some of our greatest challenges, like, this is not an I conversation, this is a we
mm,
conversation, and you're not alone. And obviously, in most situations, two heads are way better than one. And every time I come to you and I remember that we're a team and it's not just about me, I end up feeling a million times better and obviously so much more supported, and we come to a solution so much quicker. And I think, especially when you're raised to be confident and go for your dreams and independent, it can be weird to rely on somebody else, or even just bring them into the conversation, but that's
yeah,
so
really
important.
important for both people, right? Because how many people in the world have that, celebrated for doing it yourself and never asking for support? It's like such a big one. And if you're not going to ask for support from the one person that you've chosen to spend the rest of your life with, then you're missing, something beautiful. And you've done really great with that because you are
Yeah.
independent. We've got a niece who we can see is becoming a very independent young baby, and we're just thinking, you know, that's, I'm sure, how you were, right? And it's great to be able to do things yourself and know when it's time to ask for help or support. It's a huge one.
Yeah, exactly. And I know, even yesterday I was chatting with my sister-in-law and we realized that our niece is the same human design as me. And
Mm,
just really understanding like the way that you work in the world and the way that you work with people, and whether that's through a personality test or something else, has been really interesting for us. And this is just more of a sidebar. This isn't one of mine, but I think that's been really useful, and to understand that we bring different things to the table as team members, and
mhm,
both all of the facets of our personalities and the way that we move through the world, the way that we work, the way that we do life, that combination is such a powerful force, way
mhm,
more powerful than if we were trying to do everything on our own. So I think that's been really interesting too.
mhm. Yeah. So my next one, and I couldn't come up with a fancy line for this one, but ultimately it's like, um, especially when people live together for the first time, all these weird things come up. Like, oh, we do things that way in the kitchen, or we clean like this, or all these kind of ways that we got brought up. And so I think what's been really important to remember in marriage is that when people have a different way of doing things, even like mundane tasks around the house, that there's no right or wrong, that there's just the way that it is. And that coming up with it kind of is a little bit like the one I said earlier, which is that if something triggers me or upsets me, it says more about me than Emily. And life in itself, one thing we've learned in relationship coaching is that we are individuals. There are individuals that are bonded together, but we'll always be individuals. And I think the moment that if I've ever sacrificed who I am as an individual to try and make the relationship better, it doesn't. And so honor the way that you like things done, and honor the way that they like things done, and make it work, right? That's been a big one for me because you know the way I was brought up, especially around the house, about keeping things tidy and like putting things away and all these kind of things in a different way to Emily's house. Neither are wrong or right, but it's just different. And so in 10 years of marriage, it's never go into it thinking that you have to change someone or the way they do things. Instead understand that there are just different ways of doing things, and that life, if your day's stress is because of a mundane thing around the house, like a cup, or what's the classic one was the butter left out. That's the one we used to joke out, wasn't it, Em?
Hmm.
um if that's the thing stressing your life out, then you really got to reprioritize. Right.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, most of the time, you have to admit, if someone came into our house, they would think it's super clean. But your
Yeah.
level of clean is like way more than my level of clean.
Yeah.
Like really clean. And, I didn't have to do all of the daily jobs that you had to do around the house growing up. And so there has been a huge learning curve. But what I've realized is like, if you ever get upset about it, and then I feel bad, that's actually my material because it makes me feel like I'm not good enough. And that's, me, making myself feel that I'm not good enough. It has nothing to
Hmm.
do with you. And so
Yeah.
I think it's so interesting to look at those things as well and ask yourself, like, why is this triggering me about my partner? Like, these differences aren't even
Right.
that big of a deal. And again, most of the time, it's your own material.
Totally. And so, like, the ultimate lesson from this is I'm always aiming to replace judgment with curiosity, rather than she should have done it like this. Why does she do it like this? Because sometimes there is an opportunity for a better way, and you have the discussion. Oh, wouldn't it be great if we tried doing it like this? And then then Emily might be, oh, that's interesting. Okay, rather than you did it wrong, do it differently. And so I think a great thing in marriage is to try and release all the judgments and just be curious instead. And I know as a father, that's something I really want to do as well, is be curious rather than judgmental. And that starts with number one and then translates to your partner, right? Just, I wonder why. I want to understand. This is how I'm feeling about it. And I want to understand is such a great route. And it's why we've after 10 years, and majority of those 10 years living in the same house, working in the same house, being together a lot of the time, we made that work, because otherwise we'd be driving each other crazy,
I
just
think
to be
it's
curious.
also like having fun with it. I remember
Yeah.
you love things really clean, especially in the kitchen and the bathrooms. And then for me, I love organization in terms of drawers
Mm,
and closets. And
mm.
so there was one time when we were organizing the drawers and I handed you some stuff to put away in their proper place. And you were literally going to go and put it in another drawer. And we
Yeah.
both just had to laugh about it because sometimes I think we take these things far too seriously as well.
Mm,
And I heard somebody say, don't make roommate problems marriage problems
right.
because it's such a waste of energy. And if you can just have
Hmm.
fun and like be an acceptance of the other person and their quirks, and like you said, sometimes there is a better way of doing things, and be open to adjusting, but also just not take it so seriously, it'll make it a lot better.
And it's one of the first things I shared, like the little quirks that we have in our relationship.
Yeah.
That's the stuff. That is what makes it amazing. If we were just perfect robotic human beings, there'd be no flavor. And so, yeah, I have the drawer. I have that drawer that when you open it, you feel like you're going to get attacked. And it's funny. I'm
Yeah.
not saying I'm proud of it, but it's funny. And so,
And most of the time, I don't like to do the dishes as I'm cooking, but I will admit that the times where I've done the, cleaning up while I'm cooking, it's been way better because you don't have to do it after you eat. So I am
mm,
learning. So thank you.
yes.
All right, my next one is work through your trauma. And so I mentioned this
Mm,
a little bit a few minutes ago. One of my core wounds is not being good enough. And so, for those of you listening, you might not even know what your core wound is or know that you have one. But because I've done a lot of work, we both have done a lot of work with coaches and psychologists and mentors, and even being in community with other fellow high level business owners and people who are high achieving, you start to recognize some of the issues that you have that you may be bringing into your relationships. And I think, again, coming back to the fact that marriage is two individuals coming together, if you don't do that work on yourself, it just makes things way more challenging, and you
mm,
take on other people's problems, or you blame your partner for things that are actually your own material. Or like I said, when someone asks if you can clean up your mess, you take it as a personal attack and make it mean that you're not good enough. And then again, that leads to a whole spiral and tons of stuff coming up because you've never dealt with it. So really working through your own trauma and all of those limitations and all those limiting beliefs really will impact the relationship in such a positive way.
Yeah, it is all about taking personal responsibility. Both of us have had our times where we've been triggered or had some stuff come up, and we probably don't even know why. And I guess the blessing of working in the personal development space is that we have done a lot of work. But there's no reason why anyone, even not working in the personal development space, can't take responsibility for themselves so that they can have a great marriage. I mean, everyone benefits, right?
Yeah, and I know that my natural tendency when things are challenging is to go to blame. And I only
Mm,
know that because I've been able to do that work on myself. And so
mm,
just having that level of awareness about yourself and what you're bringing to the relationship, both good and bad, is so,
mm,
so powerful.
mm. Yeah. Yeah. So my final one, my favorite in some ways, is there's a difference between spending time together and being present with one another. And so I think you would assume that just because we are in the same house a lot and we're around each other all the time, that hasn't always meant that we are present with each other. And I think that with the work we've done in relationship coaching and just over the years, by implementing little practices of like shared gratitude, why we love each other, what we enjoy doing each day, and just like sharing each other's little internal world and like being, present, has been so important because I think that there was times in the beginning where, because we were in the same house all the time, we think, okay, it'd be good to have some time apart. But in that whole time together in the day, we might not have actually been present. And so what we really learned is that it's not about how many hours you are present with each other. It's just about time present. It could be 10 minutes of just like really locked in. This is what I'm feeling. What are you feeling? Has been huge for us. And I know that we have, every night we'll have that. Every morning we'll have that. And we'll have now moments where we're just locked in and we're present with each other. I think it's been so important. It stops the mind from wandering into places of assuming what the other person's thinking, right? Especially when we're having a bad day, right? We're feeling maybe a bit triggered, and it's easy to assume, oh, they don't understand, or they didn't do this, they didn't do that. And then the stories start building up in your head. Very common thing in a marriage. Whereas if you have regular points of really being present and checking in and saying, this is what I'm feeling and how are you feeling, and I love you, and those just real locked in present moments, that's what's kept it fresh and kept us so close.
So, my final one, and for everyone who loves a good exercise, this is perfect for you, is to tell each other why you love each other on a regular basis, ideally every single day. And just as you were saying, James, sometimes we don't necessarily know why we're doing things. We don't know how the other person is thinking. We make assumptions. One of the powerful things that we've done regularly is just express why we loved each other that day. So it can be as simple as, I love you because you made me dinner. I love you because you gave me a hug in the kitchen. I love you because whatever it is from that day. And I think one of my favorite things about that exercise is obviously hearing why you love me, because that always feels good. But it gives me awareness into how do you actually receive love and what means the most to you. So just like the 5 love languages exercise, really understanding your partner and what makes them feel good, because it may be different to the way in which you feel good and what is meaningful for you. So just hearing that has been really interesting to know what I've done or what I've said that makes you feel loved.
Yeah, that's such a good one. So I think a lot of people are sharing love in their own ways, but then they didn't realize that type of love doesn't mean as much to the other person, right? Because there's no communication there. So that's been huge for us, for sure, because we do have different love languages, right? We have different ways of expressing love and receiving love, and it's just creating a deeper connection.
Yeah, mine's words of affirmation, and it used to be gifts, but now it's acts of service.
Mm-hmm.
What about you?
Time and touch, but sometimes it can be acts of service that can
Yeah,
change. But time is probably the most important one.
love it. Well, it's so interesting because we didn't share these before jumping on this episode, and all of ours were different.
Some of them line up though.
Yeah.
I do like the way they flowed into each other. It's kind of
hmm
fun.
But it just shows, there's so many lessons, and some are, more impactful or stand out more to you and versus me, but
Mhm.
they're all equally as important and powerful, and it's a great combination.
Beautiful combination.
Well, thank you for your time, James. Hope everyone loved this episode, and we'd love to hear your comments. And if any of the points stood out more than others, or you have any personal stories, let us know. And yeah, happy anniversary, James.
Happy anniversary, my love.